Welcome back, ladies and gents, to another edition of the Quick Bricks NBA DFS podcast. This is your November 12th, Tuesday edition. We have 8 games on the slate. Before we go ahead and jump right into that, just want to talk about the little bit of a roster monster run we've been on. Again, last night, at another 50-point effort as Rudy Gobert. My roster monster went for 51.5 fantasy points against the Golden State Warriors. I said a 15-20 game in the Degens chat. I said a 15-15 game in the FA chat. He put up 25 points, and I think it was 14 rebounds, 16 rebounds, something like that. So we'll take it. Pretty close. Actually, a little bit more on the point side than the rebounds that I figured. Nonetheless, like I said, been on a nice little run with the roster monsters. They've been straight fire. Hope you guys are playing them. They're going to continue, hopefully, to keep putting up big points. So, with that said, let's move right on into this 8-game slate. As we usually do, we'll talk about the games, talk about the point spread. A lot of games with no lines today, so a lot of injury news to watch out for. Kind of just, it's going to be a lot of wait and see again. Last night with the Brandon Ingram, this debacle or whatever happened, I really don't know. He had no designation all day long. And then all of a sudden, 30 minutes before game time, he's rolled out, and then he's getting an MRI. So, what WTF, what happened? So anyway, that was pretty crazy. Late swap wasn't working there for 10 minutes, and there was 10 minutes till the game, was about to tip, and I was freaking out. And yeah, you guys probably got a kick out of me, tweeting out to DraftKings. Either way, I was pretty angry. Either way, I got to actually swap. But, of course, I swapped onto Draymond Green, and that did not help my lineup any at all. But as the result of that, I was also able to swap off of Daniel House and onto Montrezl Harrell, which actually helped a little bit. I had 2 lineups cash that actually put me in the profit for last night. Close to 2.5 times last night. Had one lineup go for 310.5, which all but one player were in the Fantasy Alarm playbook yesterday that I was on. So quite well, and then the other one went for, I think, 286. So let's jump into today's games. Thunder at Pacers, Indiana, -3 here at home, 211. Oklahoma City sitting at 17th in terms of pace on the season, Indiana 25th. So low total. Both teams not exactly up there in pace. OKC kind of sitting mid-pack, and Indiana sitting dead, kind of 5 from the back. So not a great pace game, but there are some good spots. Cavs at the 70s, and it's funny that game has a line, even though we don't know if Steven Adams is going to play. He's irrelevant to the spread, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, Cavs at 76ers, no line on this one. Ben Simmons, all of a sudden, miraculously, was supposed to be out weeks, it looked like, and now he could play. So there's no line on this game. Cleveland 21st ranked pace, and Philadelphia 10th. So you got a pace up spot here for both teams here. Philadelphia playing right there in the top 10 in terms of pace. So they're playing pretty fast. This is at home. I'm not exactly sure that the Cavs can keep up. I'm sure that this spread will probably be in the double digits. Even with Simmons or without. So I'm sure that's probably what they're waiting on. As far as the spread, I don't think the total is probably going to be above 216-ish. 218 is probably my guess at the highest. But that's like I said, it might be in the 220s just because, I think the 76ers get a decent lead. Moving on, Pistons at the Heat. No line in this one. Obviously, Griffin only played, I think, 18 or 20 minutes last night. Of course, this is a back-to-back, so we're going to see if he's actually going to play in his first back-to-back set. I'm kind of crossing my fingers, hoping that he does not, because I want to get Drummond at this lower price and without him. Obviously, we saw last night what he can do in a short amount of time, talking about Blake Griffin. He ate up the usage. Drummond didn't. Drummond still put up 41.5 fantasy points, but it was basically when Griffin was off the floor. If you notice in the first half, he only had 7 points and 7 rebounds. He really, Griffin played a lot of the first half, and he didn't play a whole ton in the second half. And like I said, that's where Drummond made a lot of his money, was in the second half. So that'll be one to watch, obviously. Detroit running at the 24th. ranked pace, and Miami is actually running in the 11th. So this is a pace-up spot as well for Detroit, and that's one big reason why I really hope we can get Drummond here at a little bit of a cheaper price in this nice pace-up spot here. So Pistons at Heat, like I said, no line on that one. Waiting to see that news. Knicks at the Bulls. Chicago -5.5 here at home. 213 on the total. Knicks running at the 26th in terms of pace, 26th rank, and Chicago is 13th. Chicago is actually running decently fast this year. Excuse me. I've developed a cough now lately, and it's always right around the weather change when it starts turning winter. So bear with me. Again, Knicks Bulls. This is a game that we usually would love to target. As you can see, it's going to be decently paced up. The Knicks are going to have to play at the Bulls' pace, and there's a lot of good value plays in this one. Obviously, the spread's right around where you'd want it, 5.5, ish. The total's not exactly favorable at 213, but I think this game can get fast and can probably go over that. So Hawks at the Nuggets, no line on this one. Obviously, I'm not real sure what they're waiting on. Trae Young's totally fine. The only questionables that I even saw in this game were Alex Len and Cam Reddish. I'm guessing they're the big keys to Atlanta. Either way, Atlanta ranked 23rd, Denver ranked dead last in terms of pace. Not what you would expect, again, with the Atlanta Hawks, who were first in terms of pace all of last season. So they're not running with a lot of pace this year. So something to monitor, and it is an altitude. Atlanta went into Portland the other night and actually took them to OT. So they've had a night off, so they should be decently fresh. But they got to keep that in the back of your head. Denver's a really good team. Moving on, Lakers at the Suns. The Suns being the only one. I don't know if they're only one-loss team in the NBA right now, but they're playing pretty damn good. They just gave Philadelphia the job. They just worked them over at home. They're looking good. Obviously, no line on this one. Waiting to see how AD's shoulder is. Looking if Rondo's going to make his debut. But this is a pace-up spot as well. Obviously, it's not the late-night hammer, but it's that West Coast game that you look for, obviously, here with, the Lakers are ranked 20th in terms of pace, but Phoenix is not. Sitting right there in the top 10. This is a nice pace-up spot. So a lot of people in play on that one as well. Moving on, Nets at the Jazz. Utah -6.5. Jazz are on a back-to-back. Detroit's on a back-to-back. Only two teams that are on a back-to-back tonight. So Nets at Jazz, Utah -6.5 here at home, 217 on the total. Nets ranked 5th in terms of pace, Utah 27th, so third from the last. Utah, again, are just playing with no pace. They're winning ball games, so that doesn't really matter. But, again, this is a back-to-back for them, and I would imagine that the Nets will push the pace as far as they are ranked 5th in terms of pace. They want to run fast. They want to get up and run. So this, again, is a pace-up spot for Utah here at home. Again, they're on a back-to-back. They kind of might have a little bit of dead leg. I kind of like Brooklyn here as a contrarian stack, as a contrarian team. So that'll be something we'll look at. Portland at the Kings. So we got Trailblazers going into Sacramento. De'Aaron Fox looks to be out for 3 to 4 weeks. This is not a great spot. However, for some reason, Sacramento is favored by 1.5. with a total of 225. Portland ranked 8th in terms of pace, and Sacramento's 28th. So, again, another kind of perfect storm there where you're going to get a pace-up spot with Sacramento. We know we like to target Sacramento. Again, this is going to be an interesting game. So, that is the games, 8 games on the slate. Let's go ahead and jump right into our positionals. Point guard, LeBron James, 10.5K. Averaging 67.6 fantasy points in his road games so far, 1.8 fantasy points per minute in those games, road games. Triple-double in his last 4 or 5, 32.7% uses on the road. We know that Anthony Davis is hindering with a shoulder injury. He said yesterday, I read a report where he says that there's not one single play that doesn't, happen that he doesn't hurt. This is not good looking forward for Anthony Davis. He had, bumped somebody, or he went to swat. That's what it was. He went to make a block in their last game. And don't get me wrong, he still put up amazing numbers. But he went up and he kind of came down limp on it. So that's something to monitor, obviously. with, maybe that's why LBJ has been taking up a lot more of the load lately. Or maybe it's just because he's the best basketball player in the league. So either way, LeBron at 10.5 absolutely is in play. Dame Lillard at 9.5, 43 or more fantasy points in all of his road games, 28.7% usage on the road, over 51 fantasy points in 8 of 10 games on the season. He gets a great matchup here on the road, against the Kings, who are without De'Aaron Fox. They are allowing, I think the third, what is it? I'm not sure. I thought I wrote that down. We know that Sacramento, we knew De'Aaron Fox wasn't that great a defender. It looks like Corey Joseph will be starting. He's a decent defender, but nobody can guard Dame. So, Damian Lillard at 10.5, totally fine with it. Trae Young at 9.2. He's had back-to-back games of 60-plus fantasy points, over 62 fantasy points in 2 of his 3 on the road so far this year, 35.7% usage on the season, and 38.5% usage on the road in 3 games. He's going to have to be the guy that, he was the whole team in Portland, him and Jabari. He's going to have to be that guy, and I hate to say it, but this is not the best matchup going into Denver against Jamal Murray. If you remember, I talked about Luka Doncic yesterday. He made me look like an ass either way. I still talked about how the only road game that he didn't do well was in Denver, and he put up 27.5 fantasy points against Denver and Jamal Murray. So, needless to say, I'm not exactly in love with Trae, and I think there's some better options, especially around that 9.5 and 9K range and above. So I'll probably look more towards Dame and LBJ, and probably not so much for Trae Young, but I will have a little bit. You kind of got to have to. Guys averaging near 40% usage. It's, you kind of got to play him. It's kind of like D'Angelo Russell right now. I keep fading him. I played him 2 nights ago, or I guess 3 games ago, I would say. I missed out on his 80-point game, and then of course last night the guy, I put him in the playbook yesterday, but I didn't play him. And still yet the guy's shooting 30 something times a game. I mean, even with Draymond back, I thought that might slow him down a little bit. So D'Angelo Russell is just going to be an auto pick from now on. Moving down from Trae, it looks like Ricky Rubio at 7.7. I've been beating that drum for a while. Ricky Rubio has looked really good this year, averaging 42.5 fantasy points at home, 51.5 in his last game. Carrying just a 21.8% usage. That's pretty decent, though, because he does everything else. 3 double-doubles with assists in his last, 3 or 4 games, or 3 out of 4, I believe. Or no, that's on the season, sorry. He's had 3 double-doubles with assists. And then, like I said, he's had multiple runs at double-doubles and triple-doubles. So, again, playing the Lakers tonight, I believe that, Avery Bradley is more than likely going to be on Booker. So that, once again, leaves Ricky Rubio to be one of the main factors in this game. And he's been taking over that role quite well lately. He's been scoring a lot, too. So, Ricky Rubio at 7.7. T totally fine with. One guy that I think is going to fly under the radar quite a bit, and he's cheap, is Malcolm Brogdon at 7.6. I think that, he's getting overlooked. His price went down. They're still missing Miles Turner, so, he's still getting the same regular usage that he was. OKC is allowing the 7th most fantasy points to the point guard spot. We played Bledsoe against him 2 nights ago. He was my roster monster. He put up 44.5 fantasy points. A lot of people didn't know that OKC was giving up that many fantasy points to the point guard spot. Well, they are. Chris Paul, I'm sorry, but I think he's like, don't care, A, he's not that great on defense anymore, or he just doesn't care, and B, you have a backup in Dennis Schroeder who doesn't play absolutely any fucking defense. So, Malcolm Brogdon here at 7.6. I mean, cash, of course, he's a cash cow, but I like him for tournaments. I think he's going to fly under the radar. 24.6% usage at home. He leads the team in that essence, and 36 or more fantasy points in his last 4 or 5 at home. At 7.6, I like it. I like Brogdon quite a bit. Jamal Murray at 6'3". Again, young, carrying right around a 111 defensive rating. This is at home. He's put up 35.3 and 53 fantasy points in his last 2 at home, 25.2% usage at home on the season. This is a great spot for him. This is a great spot for Jokic. I like Paul Millsap. Atlanta's just not a very good defensive team. So Jamal Murray at 6'3", absolutely tournament worthy, might even be cash worthy. One tournament play I really do like, a guy that's really come on here the last few games is Goran Dragic at 5.6, 40 and 37.5 in his last two, over 30 minutes in his last two. For those last two games, he's averaging 25.7% usage rate, which is the highest on the team. And we know that Detroit is not very good against defending guards. And he's on the second unit. He's been a absolute beast for that second unit. So Goran Dragic at 5.6, absolutely love for tournaments. Anthony Simons at 4.9, again, talked about, Sacramento and, how they are depleted at the point guard spot. He's likely going to see some Yogi Ferrell probably in that second unit. So at 4.9, he's seen nice minutes lately, 26, 36, and 24 minutes in his last three. He's put up 24, 26, and 31.3 fantasy points. It's a good spot. So Anthony Simons, he's more of a scorer than anything. But, in this spot, I think he's totally fine. And then going down on the counterpart, you have Corey Joseph at 3.7 with no De'Aaron Fox. Played 29 minutes last game, put up 24 fantasy points. Not the greatest spot here. But, of course, when you get slotted into a starting role and you're playing 29 minutes and you're 3.7K, yeah, you got to look there. So that rounds out the point guards. I want to make a little note here, insert this. One of the things that I've defined or refined. One of the things that I've switched up about my process from this year compared to last year, and it's been decently successful, is I haven't been punting near as much as I did last year. Of course, I am a GPP-minded person. I love playing tournaments. That's all I play. Of course, I pick my spots good for my tournaments, but at the same time, I'm not playing as many low salary guys this year. And obviously, it's allowing my floor to be a lot better as far as my construction goes. With that being said, if you don't have to punt, don't do it. Like, you're taking major risk. Last year, all I wanted to do was find players that I thought would be zero owned, low salary, and score me 35 plus fantasy points, and it didn't work out a whole lot. I lost more than I won considering I was playing tournaments. This year, I'm way ahead already, having mild success, and I'm not punting near as much. Picking my spots better, playing those lower-owned guys, but I'm actually playing the higher salary guys that are more prone to scoring more, okay? So I just wanted to throw that out there. Shooting guard, Devin Booker, 8-1, 4 of 6. If his last home games have went for 42 or more fantasy points, 27.3% usage at home. He is likely to get Avery Bradley, but I'm not really exactly worried about that game. Or about that side of the defensive, side. This game is going to be really nice pace with Phoenix at home. It's going to be a pace-up spot, and Booker will be in play. Jimmy Butler at 7.8. Detroit versus guards once again, averaging 42 fantasy points on the season so far. Pace-up spot here. Jimmy Butler is a great play. One here I really like, obviously, and it was weird, but I'll talk about that here in a second. Buddy Hield at 6.6. Without Fox, you would think that his usage would just skyrocket, but actually it doesn't. Actually, it gets worse. Of course, now that was this year. One thing that I need to check on and that I didn't, and that's my fault, I didn't check to see his usage rates last year with De'Aaron Fox off the floor. But for this year, they're not good. And he had like a minus 15.42 fantasy point bump. I guess it's not a bump. I guess it'd be more of a decrease. Either way, at 6.6 at home, where he's actually shot the ball decently well in this actual spot, with Portland allowing the fifth most fantasy points to the shooting guard spot, he's still garnering right around 26% usage at home. So I think I'm totally fine with Buddy. I'm hoping that he doesn't end up chalky, with like I said, with the news that De'Aaron Fox is out. But funnily enough, one guy that I will be looking to pivot to off of him is Bogdanovic, who actually sees the highest bump in usage for the Kings without De'Aaron Fox on the floor this year. He's actually been playing quite well. He's 5.4K on DraftKings. He's put up 34.5, 38 fantasy points in his last two. He gets a 6.2% usage bump without De'Aaron Fox on the floor. That equates to roughly 8 fantasy points more a game as well. So, or per 36, I should say, which is right around what he's going to play. So great numbers for Bogdanovic at 5.4. The same thing applies to Buddy, with the Portland allowing the 5th most fantasy points to the shooting guard spot. He's likely to play more of the 2 guard, obviously, with De'Aaron Fox out. He could play a little bit of the 3, which, again, I'm totally fine with whatever he plays, especially at that price. He's going to get a bump. He's playing good minutes already. Now he's probably going to play 30+. So Bogdanovic, absolutely in play for the Kings. R.J. Barrett going right back to that well. He's averaging 35 minutes. He's averaging 23.5 usage rate, and he's 5.9 playing the Bulls. I can't really look for a better play there. I mean, he's had 2 dud games, so I'm hoping what happens is that everybody jumps off that ship, even though he went for like 35 fantasy points or more in like the 3 or 4 before that. Hoping everybody jumps ship on RJ and we get him at a real low ownership tonight against this Bulls team that's not exactly the greatest against defending. So, again, RJ Barrett, Bogdanovic, and then one guy that I'm kind of looking at, I guess it's not exactly a punt because he's getting good minutes, but it's Korkmaz for Philadelphia. He's 4.2K, over 24 fantasy points in his last 3 of 5, 25 or more minutes in his last 4. If Ben Simmons is out again, he's going to get a good run. Cleveland allowing the 8th most fantasy points to the shooting guard spot. So Korkmaz, I think, is a decent slot in there if you need some salary saving. Going to the small forward spot, there's not a lot here. Most of the small forward spot on DraftKings is interchangeable with shooting guard or power forward. So with that being said, I've already named 3 or 4 in this list. So this list is kind of short. Marcus Morris, over 30 fantasy points in his last 5. Over 42 in, I think, the last 3 of 5. He's 6.3 playing against the Bulls. He had like a 17 fantasy point game last game. Nobody on the Knicks played well last game. They got blown out by the Cavs. I would highly expect for them to bounce back big time. And this is one guy that I will absolutely be looking to do so as well. 6.3, totally fine with Marcus Morris at that price for the minutes that he's getting, for the production and upside that he has. Bojan Bogdanovic let down a lot of people last night, including myself. He was in the playbook on Fantasy Alarm. I talked him up in the Degens chat. I'm going right back to him. Brooklyn allowing the 8th most fantasy points to the small forward spot. He put up a dud last night, but he still shot 14 field goal attempts. He only made 4 shots. If his shot is not falling, he's a very dependent scorer. His production depends a lot on his scoring. And if you look, he's put up over 32 or more fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 road games. So I'm going back to that well. Yes, it's 6.4K. But I'm totally fine with it against Brooklyn. It's going to be a pace-up spot here in Utah, back-to-back. Everybody's going to jump off of Bojan. I'm jumping right back on, okay? So, again, I'm totally fine with Bojan at 6.4. One play that I love quite a bit is Will Barton at 6K. 3rd straight home game of over 36 fantasy points. He's only got a 19.1% usage at home, but he's put up a double-double in his last 3 or 4, put up 5 steals in his last 3 with 2 blocks. So he's putting up really good numbers. He's playing a lot of minutes, and he gets a nut matchup here with Atlanta at home. So 6K, Will Barton, totally fine with. One last one here, Chandler Hutchinson at 4K. His price went up $800, but he played 23 minutes, put up 26 fantasy points in his start, and, with Otto Porter out. As long as he's going to start and get 23 or so minutes, and at 4K, I think I'm totally fine with. He did have 2 steals and 2 blocks, so which could be, kind of anomaly, but at the same time, this is the Knicks, and they're not exactly a great ball handling team. They do turn over the ball. So Chandler Hutchinson at 4K, I think is totally fine. So, again, that is the end of the small forward list. Like I said, a lot of the shooting guards that I mentioned are interchangeable on that spot, so you can kind of pick and choose between the 2 lists. Going to power forward, obviously, Anthony Davis at 10K. What is wrong with his shoulder? Is it hurting him more now than it was then? Now that the reports are coming out, is it something we need to be worried about? Obviously, it is something we need to be worried about if he's hurting like that, and it's obviously hasn't really hindered his performance lately, as he's put over 50 fantasy points in about all of his games, or his last 5 of 7, he's went for 50 or more. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, in this pace-up spot with Phoenix, you want to have Anthony Davis against a team that doesn't have DeAndre Ayton, and they're starting Aaron Baines and Dario Saric. So you want AD. Jabari Parker at 7.3, 31, 42.5, 57.3 in his last 3. He scored like 25 or more real points in his last 2 games. He's having to carry half the other. I say half. He's having to carry the other quarter load for Atlanta with Trae Young hoisting three quarters of the usage. So Jabari is totally fine. I don't love it, obviously, in Portland, but somebody has to score and somebody's got to take the floor for Atlanta. So 26.4% usage in his last 3 games. I'm totally fine with Jabari. Julius Randle at 7.2, 38 and 41.5 in his last 2. Chicago allowing the 9th most fantasy points to the power forward spot and the most fantasy points to the center spot. So Julius Randle's been playing really well last 2. He's been about the one only bright spot from the Knicks. So I will look to play some Julius. Tobias Harris over 41 fantasy points in 3 of his last 5. Cleveland allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to the power forward spot. If Simmons doesn't play, Tobias has been one that's been getting a bump in the usage. So I'm totally fine with Tobias. Again, of course, if Simmons doesn't play, it becomes a little bit more of a better play. I'm not a huge fan of that game, as, like I said, it has the Cavs coming into Philly, and it's just not a good spot for Cleveland. But Tobias Harris, again. Another guy that I think the Kings are going to have to lean on is Harrison Barnes here at 5'9". 36, 39, and 40 minutes in his last 3. He's obviously playing heavy minutes, 31, 39.5, and 32 fantasy points in those 3. This is a pace-up spot here with Portland at home. Portland, of course, is starting Mario Hezonja at the 4. So, Harrison Barnes, I think, is totally fine in cash, and I think he's a decent tournament play. Below him, Paul Millsap, like I said, at 4.9. This is a revenge spot if you want to look at it that way. Paul Millsap played many years in Atlanta, so this is a decent spot for him. He's had back-to-back games over 31 fantasy points, 35 minutes in both of those games as well, which I thought was pretty crazy. Seeing Paul Millsap play back-to-back 35-minute games at 40 years old or however old he is, Still yet, Jabari doesn't play a lot of defense. So this is a good spot for Millsap right under, a smidge under 5K here at 4.9. That rounds out my power forward spot. Moving on to the center. So I'm not playing Joel Embiid for the simple fact that I don't like the spot. He's 9'4", needs 50 points to make value and be worth it. Not that he can't do it, not that he won't do it. It's just that I think I like other spots here for the center spot. One being Drummond at 8.9. Please, Lord, don't let Griffin play. 8.9, you get him here at a nice little discount. 41.5 last night. And you get a nice pace-up spot here again with the Heat. So we are just praying that Griffin doesn't play. Other than him, Domantas Sabonis at 8.4. Why is this guy's price not 10K yet? I mean, he's put up over 48 fantasy points in his last 4 or 5. He's averaging 48.4 fantasy points at home. No Turner and maybe no Adams for OKC. He's going to get, a matchup with a smaller Nerlens Noel in the event that Adams doesn't play. Even if Adams does play, I'm totally fine with Sabonis here at 8.4. I think this is a crazy price on him, but still, the guy's just been murdering things. 48, averaging near 50 fantasy points at home so far on the season, and he's 8.4. Nikola Jokic at 8.3. Of course, he's averaging almost 49 fantasy points at home. We know Atlanta struggles against the bigs. Alex Len is questionable. That would mean that they would be even higher, more depleted in their bigs in the front court. This is pretty much a smash spot for Jokic, no doubt about that. Rudy Gobert, roster monster from last night is 7.5K. Actually went down $100 after putting up 51.5 last night. Thanks, DraftKings. Tonight he gets Brooklyn at home. He's put up at least 14 or more rebounds in his last 4 games. He's scored in double figures, I think, in his last 3 or 4. Put up 25 points last night against Golden State. So Rudy Gobert at 7.5. I mean, he hasn't really done great in home games this year, and I think it's more because they've just been really good defensively, and they really hadn't had to use him as much. But, with Brooklyn getting back DeAndre Jordan, it's not as great of a spot as I would love it to be if he was out. But at 7.5K, I mean, the guy still has 40-point upside still. So I'm totally fine with Rudy. And then finally, Bobby Portis at 5.5K. Of course, Chicago allowing the most fantasy points to the center spot. Mitchell Robinson is still out in the concussion protocol. Played 24 and 29 minutes in his last 2, put up 34 and 29.8 fantasy points. So Bobby Portis will absolutely be in play against the Bulls. Of course, we saw what he did last time against the Bulls, right? He put up 50.8 fantasy points. So play the revenge spot again for Bobby Portis here, except this time it's in Chicago. So, anyways, I believe it's in Chicago, isn't it? Either way, Bobby Portis at 5.5 is in play. And of course, you want to monitor the Adams situation. If he happens to sit, Noel will obviously be a value, but he's 5K now. So I'm not exactly in love with that, especially in Indiana against Sabonis. It's not my favorite spot. Just something to look at and monitor if Adams doesn't play. So that is it. That is this edition of the Quick Bricks NBA DFS podcast, brought to you by the good guys over at Fantasy Degens. As always, I'm Sean Mitchell at SMitchell17 on the Twitter machine. If you want to talk, cool. If you want to discuss anything, I'm in chats basically daily, all throughout the day. Either the Fantasy Degens chat and the Slack chat, or over in Fantasy Alarm in the user Slack or the user chat, live chat. Enjoy your Tuesday. This is a really nice slate, so let's talk some basketball later.